I want to start with saying something that might feel a bit uncomfortable. Overeating, stress eating, whatever you want to call it, is not a food problem. It's actually an emotional problem that food has become the solution to. And until you understand that, you can have the most structured program in the world, you can have the easiest diet to adhere to, but you will still find yourself at 10 p.m. in the kitchen eating what you said you wouldn't eat. So first and foremost, let's make that clear. The food isn't the problem. So today I'm actually going to show you exactly what happens to you in that moment from a psychological perspective, from a neurological perspective, and in terms of your own identity. And at the end, I will give you the tool that you need to overcome the urge next time that it hits. Every behavior you have, including the ones that you hate yourself in, they started as a solution, not a problem. A solution. At some point in your life, most likely when you were a lot younger, under a different kind of pressure, you found that eating that something would make the problem go away. Whether it was stress, loneliness, fear, overwhelm, whatever that was, food delivered relief quickly and reliably. It just worked. So your brain filed it, labeled it, stored it as something that works. There's a model in psychology called the family system, developed by Richard Schwartz. And one of its core principles is this: every behavior, including the ones that look destructive from the outside, originally developed as protection. So this overeating pattern was actually doing something useful for an earlier version of you. And by the way, this is not an excuse. I want to be clear about that. It's a starting point because you cannot change what you don't understand, and you can't understand something that you're still judging. Remember that. So the first step is to stop looking at the behavior as the enemy and to start getting curious about how it surfaced and what its function actually is. What is trying to protect you from. I'm going to tell you something I haven't told many people before. I had been an athlete for a good portion of my life. I had been disciplined for years. I knew how to eat. I knew how to train hard. I had the knowledge. I had the habits in place. I had a whole system built for me. But then this was back in 2021. My business started to grow. And I mean, really grow. For the first time, it started to fly. And at that moment, I started stress eating for the first time in my life. And at first, I genuinely couldn't explain it. Nothing about my external situation with food had changed. The food was the same, my knowledge was the same, my habits were the same in fact. And I still recognized myself as a very disciplined person. In fact, I was still very much regimented even when it came to cooking my own meals. But I kept finding myself reaching for things that I didn't need after difficult days, after high pressure moments. And the most frustrating thing was that everything I knew about discipline just wasn't working. And here's the thing, this is what I needed to understand. The stressor was new. The pressure of building my business, becoming a leader, it was all new territory for me. And I had no pre-existing tools to process all of that. In fact, I'd spent years building physical discipline, but I never really explored the emotional side of things, especially in relation to food. So I had to slow down, get analytical with myself and ask myself some hard questions. Questions like, what is happening right before this? What am I actually feeling? What is the eating giving me at that moment? And when I sat with those questions, the answers were always the same. In fact, it was never hunger. It was a way to switch off, to get some comfort. It was a way of stepping out of the pressure. A moment that was just mine and no performance was required. So the stress eating was serving something real, but it just wasn't the right solution. But let me show you what happens neurologically, because that's really interesting. Research from Meg Ewan's lab at Rockefeller University has shown that stress, chronic stress, the ones that is built over weeks and months, it physically weakens the part of your brain that is responsible for decision making. The prefrontal cortex, the part that plans, regulates, that says you don't actually need this. And at the same time, the amygdala, which is your brain's threat detection system, it becomes more reactive. So this means that when you're under a lot of stress, you're not using the same brain that you use on a Sunday when you're relaxing. That regulatory system is compromised, weakened, and the reactive system is heightened. So of course, anything that offers some relief, some comfort just becomes very attractive all of a sudden. But that's not only it. Another landmark 1997 study found that dopamine, which is your brain's reward signal, it fires up when you anticipate a reward before you even receive it, which means that by the time that you open the fridge, the chemical pull that drove you there was already doing its its job. The urge itself carries the dopamine charge. That's why willpower at the moment of the urge is just a wrong tool to use. You're already lost in a neurological battle by the time that you step into the kitchen. In fact, we need to go earlier. Here's what I see over and over with clients. The men that I worked with are not undisciplined. They're not lazy. The contrary, in fact. And you might relate to this. They are high-performing men under a lot of pressure. In fact, they've spent years perfecting the external life, but they've never been taught how to deal with the inner life. And so the stress builds and builds and builds, and because there is no emotional release, no conscious way of processing it, then the body finds one. And it's usually food or alcohol or scrolling or some other fast access way of switching off. Take my client Carolis, for example. He's the perfect example of this pattern. He's a family man, career at full intensity, and he's always been committed to fitness, always been quite strong. But the pressure coming from work as well as personal commitments, he kept bringing it back to the same place. Overeating after hard days, snacking hundreds and hundreds of calories, and consistently using food as a way to decompress. So despite putting a lot of effort into the training and despite trying to eat clean most of the time, he couldn't see the results that he was working for. So the first thing that we did when we started working together was just understanding that it wasn't about the food, but it was what was happening hours before the food even came in. And every single time the pattern was the same. A high demand week, sometimes even several weeks, emotional fatigue of some sort. And the food was the fastest signal to his nervous system to just say, okay, I need to switch off. So again, the food wasn't the problem. The lack of any other way to decompress was it. And once Carolis understood that, once he could see the trigger, understand and be able to name the feeling before the urge arrived, that's when everything changed. He stopped fighting the food and he started addressing the pressure. So we started implementing ways to decompress into his days, into his weeks. So we gave the nervous system a different signal. And so the overeating, which felt shameful and almost compulsive for years, became something that he could see coming, pause and redirect. And the results came, of course, not because his diet changed, but because we changed what the eating was trying to solve. We changed his relationship with food. So here is what I want you to take away from this. Next time that you feel the urge, before you take action on it, just do this one thing. Name what you're actually feeling, but not like I'm stressed. That's too broad. Get specific as you can. Am I frustrated? Am I overwhelmed? Am I depleted? Am I anxious? Am I lonely? Do I feel like I've failed at something today? Say it out loud or write it down if you can. Find a way to truly own it and allow yourself to feel the feeling. And there's actual neuroscience behind why this works. A UCLA study from a neuroscientist, Matthew Lieberman, found that when you name an emotion, you literally put a word to it, the amygdala activity drops. So the emotional alarm in your brain quiets down. Lieberman literally described it as a way to hit the brakes on your emotional response. And this doesn't mean that the emotion disappears. It just means that you create a gap where you can have consciousness and take action. Because after you name it, you can then observe the emotion. And if you're observing it, you become conscious and you can take action. And honestly, this is the whole thing. It's just one moment of self-awareness and honesty with yourself. So as I said at the start, every behavior starts as a solution. I want to come back to that for a second, because if you've been beating yourself up about that, you have tried to out-discipline, out-plan it, you've been trying to put even more pressure on yourself, use your willpower, but it just keeps coming back. It's because you've been treating the symptom, not the cause. The real work is asking yourself, what is this behavior trying to protect me from? And by the way, this is not a therapy question. This is a performance question, is a life question. And I'll tell you this, after having worked with hundreds of high-performing men, the most successful ones are not the ones that put the most pressure on themselves. They're not the ones who are the hardest on themselves. They're the ones who can be the most honest with themselves. You build everything by being the most analytical and strategic about the things that really matter. And this is another thing that truly matters. So it responds to the same approach. Stop fighting the behavior. Get curious about what's underneath it. Name what you are feeling and build a constructive response to that feeling. And I promise you, the eating will take care of itself. If this landed with you, feel free to like and subscribe. I post weekly content about psychology, neuroscience, and yes, of course, physical transformation too, because all of it is intertwined. It's all connected. And if you have specific patterns that you're trying to understand and overcome, you're struggling with it and you would like some help, click the link in my bio or in the caption below. below. Book a consultation call with me and we'll make sure to dive into all of it. Get some clarity and build an action plan that we know will take you to your ultimate goal. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.